This week, 0 days in Counter-Strike clients could be used to build a major botnet. In fact, they did. Huge aluminum plant is hit by a severe ransomware attack. Myspace, remember them? They lost 50 million songs, lost in air quotes. Wi-Fi signals can reveal your password, according to some academic research. And PuTTY in your hands. An SSH client gets patched after RSA key exchange memory vulnerability was spotted. Ralf Hund from VMRay joins us on expert commentary to discuss the evolution of the GandCrab malware. All that and more on this episode of Hack Naked News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show that brings you the security news each week. And despite popular belief, we do wear pants. It's Hack Naked News. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. Welcome, everyone, to Hack Naked News. This is episode number 211 for March 19th, 2019. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian. Make sure you join us at InfoSec World in 2019. That's right, coming up real soon. It's going to be a fun conference. We're doing interviews, hacker trivia, all kinds of fun stuff. You got a discount code, infosecworld.misty.com. Use the code OS19-SecWeek, get you 15% off. If you are interested in doing a free briefing or a paid interview that will air on Enterprise Security Weekly, you can go to securityweekly.com/conference request. A quick announcement: register for upcoming webcasts with our fine sponsors, Logarithm and Recorded Future, by, and we made this easy for you, going to securityweekly.com/webcast. That's right. Remember this URL, securityweekly.com/webcasts. That's right. 2 are coming up with both Logarithm and Recorded Future. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're talking about file integrity monitoring on Thursday of this week on that webcast. So get registering. And now, the sirens in the background tell me it is now time for the security news. 0 days in, the Counter-Strike client used to build a major botnet. This is a really neat attack. So a player launches the official Steam client and selects a game server. Then, upon connecting to a malicious server, the server exploits a remote code execution vulnerability in the client. Malicious libraries are uploaded to the victim's device. Depending on the type of vulnerability, one of the two libraries will be downloaded and execute some Trojans that are named, as the AV industry names them, bizarre names. Actually, this one makes sense. It's the handle of the malicious CrowdStrike server perpetrator Bellinard. The Trojan was spread by already infecting clients advertising low-ping servers. In this case, their proxies run by the attacker continually infecting new hosts. So what happens is I connect to a server, it's malicious, it infects me, then I start advertising out more malicious servers, which then infects more people. Also, people still play Counter-Strike. This episode is like going all the way back to early 2000s with another story as well. I've personally been camping in a Counter-Strike server for about 10 years, so come find me. Beto O'Rourke's secret membership into America's oldest hacking group. Of course, those of us in the security community know it as the CDC, or Cult of the Dead Cow. I also think this is really cool. The article states there's no indication that O'Rourke ever engaged in the edgiest sorts of hacking activities, such as breaking into computers or writing code that enabled others to do so. But his membership in the group could explain his approach to politics better than anything else on his resume. His background in hacking circles has repeatedly informed his strategy as he explored and subverted established procedures in technology, the media, and government. Now, I have to say I'm excited to learn about this and because I think it's really cool, but also the real news here is there's a new book about to be released. The title is called Cult of the Dead Cow: How the Original Hacking Supergroup Might Have Just Saved the World. It's a hardcover and no audio book that I could tell. There is a Kindle version and an audio CD. Joseph Menn, who is a journalist for Reuters, is the author, and it's due to be released on June 19th of this year. Huge aluminum plant is hit by a severe ransomware attack. Ghidra, which employs more than 35,000 people in over 40 countries, says the attack began on Monday night and is ongoing. Some of the company's factories have been forced to halt production, though other facilities, including its power plants, are functioning normally. It was, in fact, a ransomware attack. They do have backups, and they're working on removing the malware, fixing systems before doing, a complete restore. They're also communicating regularly via social media on their Facebook page. And listen, folks, communication is the key in times of chaos. And make sure that you have extra aluminum foil for an upcoming story, which could be in short supply now that there's a ransomware attack. Anyway, public service announcement: don't store two-factor authentication codes in password managers. Password managers, they have limits. And the article says for many users, this is still too inconvenient. The fact that they have to have their phone or some second factor, and believe me, I get it. It is an inconvenience to go get my two-factor auth token when I'm trying to log into something. So now they proactively generate a code inside the password manager that serves as your SMS message or second factor. So the password manager started offering what they call TOTP, which I don't remember what that stands for. Anyway, they generate the second factor in addition to your password. But wait, if my password manager is sending my password and my second factor token, isn't that just like one factor now? So you shouldn't do that, essentially, is the moral of the story. You can read more about it in the article on the show notes. Yeah, and that story is still scrolling. Okay, Myspace loses 50 million songs in a server migration. Over 50 million songs up until 2015 that were published to the Myspace platform are now no longer available. And officially, Myspace says this: as a result of a server migration project, any photos, videos, and audio files you uploaded more than 3 years ago may no longer be available on or from Myspace. They say, we apologize for the inconvenience and suggest that you retain your backup copies. Yeah, like 10, 15 years ago, dude, I don't have backup anyway. If you'd like more information, they go on, they say to contact their data protection officer. I'm not sure what recourse you have because the data's gone. What will we do without MySpace music from 15 years or whatever, how long it was there? Somehow, I believe, we'll press on. Others believe there's a conspiracy that MySpace had no plans to save that data because it was too costly and just didn't migrate it over, and it went off into the dev nulls of the world, and it's gone to save them money. Yay for MySpace. Epic is in hot water over Steam scraping code. So it's good. We get to talk about all the video game companies, the two major ones anyway. So this is not cool. Last week, players found the client gathering information about their accounts on rival gaming services Steam, and Reddit was up in arms. Reddit user posted that Fortnite users allegedly had suspicious activity in the Epic Games launcher, which controls the Fortnite software. They claim it was watching other processes on the machine, reading root certificates, and storing hardware information in the registry, among other things. Stay in your lane, Epic, in your lane. Let the teenagers play Fortnite, whatever. Wi-Fi signals can reveal your password. This is where you need your aluminum foil. Did you know, quoting from the article, that you can detect someone's breathing and heart rate even if you're in the next room? Well, you can, and as the breathing and skin movements are affected by the propagation of Wi-Fi signals, and changes in the Wi-Fi signals can be detected for even the smallest of movements. These small movements include when you enter your PIN on your phone, and academic research states that in their test they had about an 80% accuracy rate using Wi-Fi to grab your PIN number. Get your tinfoil hats and your tinfoil screen protectors. Somehow I don't think that'd work so well. PuTTY in your hands, an SSH client is patched. There were several vulnerabilities. It's time to update PuTTY. The fixes implemented on in PuTTY over the weekend include new features plugging a plethora of vulnerabilities in the Telnet and SSH client, most of which were uncovered as part of an EU-sponsored HackerOne bug bounty. Version 0.71 of PuTTY includes fixes for a remotely triggerable memory overwrite in the RSA key exchange, which can occur before the host key verification, potential recycling of random numbers used in cryptography, that's bad, on Windows, hijacking by a malicious help file in the same directory as the executable, on Unix. Why would you run PuTTY on Unix? A remotely triggerable buffer overflow in any kind of server-to-client forwarding, multiple denial of service attacks that can be triggered by writing to a terminal. Fun stuff. Mirai variant picks up new tricks, expands its list of targeted devices. This is somewhat not really that interesting. Basically, a new variant of Mirai was spotted by researchers at Palo Alto, which they found out uses 27 exploits, 11 of which are new, and wields 4 new sets of default credentials to brute force devices. The newer exploits are targeting the what was aforementioned in the article, the LG and Wii present devices, D-Link network video cameras and routers, Zixel routers, and assorted Netgear devices, routers, and wireless controllers. The NSA has released a cool new tool, but shortly after its release, it was found to have a remote code execution bug. The Ghidra project, which allows you to do debugging and disassembly, contains an XML external entity vulnerability. The issue was uncovered less than 24 hours after Ghidra was released by the NSA. By a researcher with the handle SGHCTOMA. I'm not sure how you say that. Anyway, the attack occurs when XML input containing a reference to an external entity is processed by a weakly configured XML parser, according to the group. The attack could lead to disclosure of confidential data, denial of service, server-side request forgery, port scanning from the perspective of the machine where the parser is located, and other host system impacts. Other host system impacts. One wonders what that could be. We'll take a short break, come back with expert commentary from Ralf Hund at VMRay to talk about GandCrab. Stay tuned. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Welcome back, everyone. This is our expert commentary here on Hack Naked News. Quick announcement before we get started. We've just released our Security Weekly 2019 survey. That's 25 publicly traded security companies that we're tracking. If you're using any of those companies and would like to participate in a survey and be invited to a private webcast, you can go to securityweekly.com and click on the survey link. We'd like to know if and how you're using that completely anonymously. And again, we'll have a private webinar. It'll be awesome. Secure World Boston is hosting their 15th annual conference March 27th through the 28th at the Heinz Convention Center. Security Weekly listeners get $100 off by going to secureworldexpo.com and using the code SecurityWeekly. For the expert commentary segment today, we welcome Ralf Hund. He's the co-founder of VMRay. He's also a PhD in computer science, where he focused on new analysis methods for software binaries with a strong focus on malware. So who better to come on and tell us a little bit about this strain of malware that we're calling GandCrab? Ralf, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul. Nice to be here.
Yes, nice to have you. This malware was really fascinating. I think our listeners should definitely, if you're listening to this segment, we're going to give it kind of a high-level, quick overview. But I strongly encourage everyone to go to our wiki, wiki.securityweekly.com. This is Hack Naked News episode 211, and take a look at the articles that are posted in support of this topic because the malware looks pretty cool if you want to better understand how attackers are constructing the malware. So Ralf, tell us a little bit about GandCrab.
Yeah, so GrandCrab is a ransomware which is distributed as a ransomware as a service. It has gained a lot of traction over the last month, which is why there have been a couple of good research on it. If you are more interested, as you said, just check out the different blog posts that are written about it. There are several aspects which are interesting about GandCrab. The one very interesting aspect, which I think we should focus on also in this interview, is the evasion resistance and the malware evasion capabilities that it has. So, as with many modern malware that we see or that we've seen in the past years, it has some methods inside which tries to evade also that it is running in a analysis system. Mm-hmm. So this would usually mean like a sandbox system, for example, and that's correct. Like pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I should state, should have stated earlier that VMRay is a sponsor of the show, and you can find out more information about their awesome technology at securityweekly.com/VMRay. They've got, I mean, to call it a sandbox kind of does it, I think, a little bit of disservice. It's a very smart and intelligent sandbox, and I would imagine that analyzing malware such as this is right in your wheelhouse and in line with how your product helps lots of companies today.
Exactly, yeah. Because that's exactly one of the big problems that a lot of these defensive systems are coping with, which is that there is this ongoing cat and mouse game between the attackers and the defenders. So that ever since sandboxing has become a big thing and it's actually being deployed in commercial systems, attackers try to detect whether they are running with their malware under such a sandbox. And if they detect it, they just don't do anything. And that's kind of like an inherent disadvantage of the entire approach, because you can only base your judgment on the behavior that happens during the analysis. And if the malware just doesn't act maliciously, then you're not going to detect it. And,
right.
Yeah.
So is the detection, is some of it based on the distribution method and then some of it based on the packer, like how they're packing it?
It's different. Usually it's the packer who has these capabilities, mm-hmm. and there are various different methods which you can implement. Like in the early days, the first sandbox detection, so to say, were essentially VM detections. So instead of really trying to detect that you're running in a sandbox, you would just detect whether you're running under, let's say, VMware or QEMU or KVM or whatever. Mm-hmm. And if so, then you would just conclude that, okay, this is probably an analysis system, and then you would just not do anything after all. This has changed a bit though, so because virtualization is basically deployed to a lot of end user systems as well, it doesn't really make sense to exclude all of these systems from your infections. Mm-hmm. So people are trying to more directly detect these sandboxes.
I gotcha. And what are some of the ways that GandCrab is able to detect if it's in an analysis system?
GandCrab uses a technique called API hammering, and the idea behind that is that you don't really try to directly detect whether you're running in a sandbox. It's more of an indirect method. So what you do is you create a loop at the beginning of your program which calls certain API functions or certain functionality in the operating system very often, like 1 million times or so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you call this function 1 million times. Usually, this is not a problem on a normal system because this function is very fast. The operating system can handle it quickly. So you're not going to really notice any difference. Mm-hmm. However, if you're a sandbox and you lock this particular action, like this particular call, then you incur quite a big overhead, which usually isn't a problem. But if it happens in a loop, which is called 1 million times, then this slows down your sandbox system eventually, or can slow it down dramatically, and this means that eventually you're not able to really have a verdict because your sandbox loops too long in this initial loop.
That's interesting. Now, the attacker's goal by calling this function 1 million times is to analyze the timing in the results. Is that true?
Yeah, they don't even analyze the timings. They could do it. That's also one way to do it. Mm-hmm. But in that case, they just call this loop and that's it. And they know that in a system such as sandbox, which incurs a lot of overhead, mm-hmm. like if the sandbox is slow, and a lot of sandboxes are like this. They incur a lot of overhead, so it'll never reach the point after the loop ever, because in a sandbox analysis you have some timeout, which is a couple of minutes. You don't have an indefinite amount of time to analyze the system, and if that timeout is hit while the sample is still in the loop in the beginning, you're not going to see of anything that would have happened afterwards.
I gotcha. Yeah, so that, I mean, they're basically tying up CPU or cycles to evade detection. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's an interesting approach because it also shows that a sandbox needs to be performant also for evasion, not only for just in general being fast, but it just also needs to be performant because otherwise you can even be evaded.
Right. And then they're also trying to jump into different DLLs. Is that true?
In GandCrab, you don't see this, but you see this in a lot of other malwares. You see that, for example, different kinds of sandbox detections would be, for example, that you try to detect certain artifacts which are left inside the system by the sandbox itself. So, for example, many sandboxes, they have own processes which are running in the system, or they have a kernel driver which is loaded in the system. And you can try to detect this artifact directly, and if you see it, you know that you essentially know you're running a sandbox. This is like, for example, one method to do it. Also, as I said, VM detections, you still see them a couple of times. This would, for example, mean that you check in the registry whether you see that a certain device in the system is named such as with QEMU, which emulates certain devices in the system and so on.
Right. But now your VMRay sandbox uses the hypervisor technology rather than hooking inside the operating system, making it more difficult, right, for malware to determine if it is in a sandbox.
Exactly, because this fixes the inherent problem. Like what I said in the beginning, you can try to detect that you can try to directly detect the sandbox, and that's because of an inherent flaw in the design of a lot of systems, which is that the sandbox itself, the software, and the malware that it executes, it runs in the same system. Like it runs in one virtual machine, and oftentimes it even runs on the same privilege level inside the machine. And this just means that the malware can eventually, if it really tries to, it can detect that it's running inside a sandbox, because every sandbox leaves artifacts inside the system. It's impossible to write a sandbox which runs inside the VM and does not leave any traces.
Right.
And it can be detected then. And that doesn't happen with VMRay, because VMRay is monitoring from the outside. It's an hypervisor-based approach. We do not have any modifications in the VM. That's why this is not possible.
Gotcha. And then it also does some kind of obfuscation as well, also in an effort to evade detection or also to evade a sandbox, right?
Exactly, yeah. The obfuscations more try to or defeat basically these virtualization detection approaches that I mentioned previously. Yep. So there is still malware out there which tries to detect whether it's running in a virtualized system. And for these kind of systems, we also have obfuscation running. So we obfuscate certain device names, for example, and we try to ensure that every virtual machine is really unique. Some sandbox systems, they give you one image when you buy the sandbox, one Windows 7 image with Office installed and Adobe Reader installed. And you are forced to use this specific image for all of your analysis. And actually, every customer of this company is forced to use this image. And this also makes it much easier to fingerprint than the analysis system. Because if an attacker somehow gets his hands onto that VM, he can just, for example, check, is the username John whatever, which is static for every VM. And if so, he just basically detects the sandbox. And for that, you also need some sort of obfuscations so that you can just ensure that for every customer of yours, they have a different VM image so that nobody can easily fingerprint.
Right. And it's interesting that ties us into the Easter eggs. If you're analyzing malware and you have some of the same artifacts in all of your analysis environments, attackers seem to be picking up on that, and they actually left specific messages for specific researchers inside their malware.
Yeah, they've been doing that ever since. I've seen a lot of talks where researchers found notes about themselves in later versions of malwares they analyzed and published stuff about it. Yeah,
I think that's really funny, but also underscores the point that attackers are paying attention to how and how often they're being detected and building that right into their malware.
Yeah, sure, they do it. They check, for example, the public sandboxes that you will see. Some sandboxes offer public services. They would permanently submit their stuff there and check how they can detect these kind of systems and so on and so forth. So
right.
Yeah, that's really happening on a daily basis.
And then so GandCrab goes on, if it does manage to get on the system, and it essentially ransomwares the system after that, right? Which would be bad.
Exactly, it ransomwares the system, locks important files away, and then forces you to pay money, what every ransomware does in the end.
Right. And people sometimes have very distinct viewpoints as to whether or not you should pay the ransom. Like sometimes they get disheartened, right? That people just pay the ransom, and it's like, well, you're funding the attackers now.
Yeah, it's a question that has been discussed a lot of times. There is even interesting research from a couple of people who managed to take over the backend infrastructures from ransomwares. And if you do that, you can actually see how many people pay for it. I cannot remember the exact numbers, but I think it's something like a 1% digit number. At least that's the number that I've heard. And I even think that very often you actually get back the key, and you are able to decrypt your system.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you have to decide yourself whether you want to do it or not. I mean, I guess if you're an organization and there is some super important data on this one single PC which has just been encrypted, what are you going to do? I mean, you just try to pay eventually. But I think in general, if you don't really have to pay it, you shouldn't do it.
Right. Agreed. And it really underscores the point, as damaging as this malware can be, that you need something that's going to clean this or tell you that it's going to be installed on your systems, right?
Yeah, because once the data is locked, that's it. If it's really encrypted well, there is nothing you can do. Sometimes, like with not so good ransomware, the authors implement flaws in the encryption they use, and you can still kind of decrypt it. But if they're doing their job well, there's nothing you can do, and the damage can be tremendous. Like, for example, in Germany, we've seen it that one of the biggest German train provider in the end was infected, and people could even see on the displays inside the main stations. You could see the ransomware node sometimes on some big German stations.
Yeah,
so
not only that, I mean, that's damaging a lot to your reputation, as well as your impact of being able to provide your service, in this case the train system.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and the good thing about it is, though, that it educates people pretty well.
It's true.
Mean, once you've been infected with a ransomware, you really understand that you should watch out and be careful of what you need to install. It's different than whether you're infected with some bot which works in the background and sends some spam emails or so.
Right. Yeah, it's very impactful, certainly. Anything specific about GandCrab that you also want to point out, Ralf, in your analysis?
So if you want to have more details, I would just recommend that you read our blog posts. There's a very long blog post which we keep on updating by one of our researchers called Tamas Bokchan. He does a great job at tracking the entire family. And if you're more interested, I would just recommend that you check this out for the technical details. It explains it much better than I could do it right now.
Awesome. Yeah, and he goes through the different versions, version 1 through 4, and all that analysis is there. So, Ralf, thank you so much for appearing on the show. If our listeners want to learn more, you can go to securityweekly.com/VMRay. You can read their awesome write-up on GandCrab on their blog, and also start your trial of VMRay. So, Ralf, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time on Hack Naked News.